Thank you so much. So glad to be here today. This is going to be an incredible panel because this is one of the subjects that's so near and dear to me personally, but also one where there's significant growth. And so we're going to get to talk to experts who have views on current and future strategies around drone operations, around infrastructure, and they're going to share their latest thinking. So we're going to hear about current use cases on how both public sector utilities and civil infrastructure are using drones in inspection projects, but also the future vision of how UAS applications with BVLOS and 5G capabilities for transportation and utility monitoring will change, and from their perspective, how they'll be involved and integrate that process. So with that, we're going to talk to our panel now, and they're going to introduce themselves. Scott.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Scott Uebelhart. I'm the Chief Scientist for the MassDOT Aeronautics Drone Program. I've supported MassDOT Aeronautics for about 5 years now, and really kind of helped grow our drone program from an initial concept to now a thriving organization. We have an active operational flight team that every day is flying drones across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for a variety of use cases, both in the transportation sector as well as supporting other state agencies. And I also lead the Commonwealth UAS integration program, which is focusing on developing and integrating innovative new capabilities, such as beyond visual line of sight operation across the state, focusing initially on a rail inspection, looking at developing surveillance capability to detect drones operating around our airports where perhaps they shouldn't be, and producing a roadmap for advanced air mobility operations across the state. So, pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Riley.
Hello, my name is Riley Beaman. I'm the UAS program manager for North Carolina, where we're a IPP program state and now a beyond state, doing different things from medical package delivery, food delivery, infrastructure inspection, which we're talking about today. And my background is in public safety. So I came to the UAS program manager role as 18 years public safety, operating the North Carolina Public Safety Drone Academy for the state and doing all kinds of training across the state. But we are doing all kinds of stuff here in North Carolina, and I look forward to talking about it here in just a few minutes.
Riley, that's great. You guys are certainly ahead of the game in North Carolina. We look forward to hearing all about that. Alex, tell us about it.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Cadigan. I'm an environmental engineer at Spire. My main shtick there is leading permitting, inspection, and training initiatives for air, water, waste regulation compliance. But I'm here because I'm a founding member of Spire's drone pilot program, which is very much in its infancy still. But in the meantime, I am its current program administrator and currently its most frequent flyer as well. So I'm out in the field leading the charge on inspecting our infrastructure in a variety of ways in the company. And I'm also partially in charge of leading the inspection task force for environmental just in general and steering company-wide implementation of other novel inspection technologies. So I'm well positioned to help steer the use of drones in the company, and I'm excited to share what I've learned from my experiences thus far with you.
Thank you so much, Alex. Well, don't go too far because I'm going to ask you first. How has Spire been using drones specifically for infrastructure inspection? I know you guys are, fairly young in your operation, but tell us a little bit more about that and exactly the details of that of the inspection and the assets.
Sure. Well, just to give some background, we just stood up our program over the course of the last calendar year. In that time, we've only trialed about 6 Blue Label quadcopter drones with a roster of 9 decentralized pilots. And our focus with this pilot program was to visually inspect various aspects of our natural gas distribution infrastructure. As background, as a natural gas distribution company, most of our assets are underground. We do have some storage and transmission assets, but most of our distribution network, as you know, is buried. That might intuitively make above ground surveillance seem less significant, but there's quite a few transformative use cases that I'll share here. First of which, our pilots conducted visual inspections of in-progress construction sites, before the pipe is actually in the ground, for revegetation progress monitoring, as well as stormwater control monitoring, which is my mainstay actually. Similarly, post-construction right-of-way inspections were also conducted with drones to monitor for vegetation encroachment and other potential concerns along those lines. Spire's pilots also conducted visual quality inspections of SCADA equipment on various telecommunications towers, which was very useful, and also assisted with corrosion and quality surveys of suspended distribution infrastructure on structures like bridges, for example. And there were a fun few interesting projects that appeared during our trial period as well that we didn't plan for, like mapping out surface drainage patterns at company-owned facilities.
I mean, this is really the power of what drones can do, and I think the further that we get into these programs, we're going to start seeing more and more unique use cases. And so, with that, Riley, what kind of unique ways is North Carolina DOT specifically using drones in public safety? I mean, you guys are ahead of the game. So, with your public safety background, tell us a little bit about some of the unique ways we know about accident recreation and some other aspects of this, but let's talk about that for a second, and then we're going to jump into infrastructure more deeply.
Sure. So for North Carolina, we've took an approach of where we're trying to educate our public safety sectors across the state, and just as anybody would expect, we're using them for search and rescue, SWAT teams, Overwatch as far as for active shooters, and then as you said, scene reconstruction with our highway patrol. They have a very large team that travel the state. They're able to clear interstates much quicker. And one new thing that we're using for public safety and we're very excited about and proud of is that we have IMAP trucks on our interstates, which are just rovers that go up and down the interstate that look for wrecks or stranded motorists or anything like that. And our UAS department, we had the idea a few months ago of we put a photo kite, a tethered drone system in those IMAP trucks. The members don't have to have a Part 107. It's pretty much plug and play. And so we outfitted a couple of IMAP trucks to start on the interstate. We did spend around 2 weeks training with those groups. We released the first truck on a Sunday afternoon, and within 2 hours, it responded to a double 18-wheeler head-on collision. And it launched the photo kite instantly, and it flew for 6 hours, providing live streams back to our comm center, our incident command center here in Raleigh, aviation, and all the first responders who were coming to that wreck or scene. And so it provided a wealth of information on the first flight. And so we're putting more across the state. And now what we're learning is from the public safety side of that photo kite, now we're looking at what is it producing for DOT? How do we clear roads quicker? What are the assets needed to do that? So that's something that we've seen great success with. Something else that we're focused on is our hurricane seasons. As you guys know, we're generally hit really hard with hurricanes, as in Florence and things like that. So we're using drones right now for hurricane missions to where we're going out and we're looking at volumetrics and soil and water as far as on our coastlines and areas that are heavily affected. And then, in the event that a hurricane comes this season, and knock on wood, we're hoping that we can skate by this year. But in the event that it does, we have all this data and volumetrics that we can align after the hurricane. So we can dispatch groups to say, hey, we need 500 tons of sand in this area because it's eroded out from the storm, or this intersection is blocked from water. So those are just some of the things that we're using as far as public safety with the tie-in with infrastructure.
Well, Riley, that's an interesting point. I want to stay there for 1 second, because at the end of the day, we're using these drones for data. I always tell people it doesn't matter if you put the sensors on a kite, it's about gathering the data. And so are you able to integrate this new aerial data with existing data that DOT and that the state has to be even more effective? I know, again, drone ops are still fairly, young operation, but are you seeing that kind of come together? I mean, I love what you guys are doing there around erosion and where you need assets placed, but are you going a little bit further with it in a way that you could speak on it?
We are. We're trying with our GIS department. We are in the process of creating dashboards to where we gather all this information, both some of it manned. Back when we were flying a lot of manned operations, to see the difference in what has changed now versus then. And so with just another example with airport runway inspections, we do a lot of those. Those predominantly used to be done on the ground or by a manned aviation pilot flying over and getting pictures of it. And now we're being able to scale that down to minute process of using drones to get really fine-tuned data. And so we are creating dashboards for the state where we can put all this information, and whether it be hurricane or inspections of different infrastructures here in the state, what was it a couple of years ago versus modern day with our new technologies. So we're trying to harness that and come up with a dashboard to where we can put all that to further look at it and research that. We're blessed to have North Carolina State University right beside us, and they're doing so much in research and development, and great partners with us, along with our Beyond partners. Not all are just UAS as far as flight and operations and industry. A lot of them are software, and how can we use this data and this information in the volumetrics and things like that to better assess things that are going on in the state, both past, present, and future.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many moving pieces to this, both the photogrammetry, the geospatial data, and I think we're just beginning to scratch the surface of how we're going to use this in combination with those other feeders into the process, software and all the other impact and your relationships. I think this is a great example. I'm going to move on to Scott to talk a little bit more about DOT Now Massachusetts. How do you normalize or successfully normalize drone operations into an existing organizational workflow, like your transportation inspection processes? I mean, you already are working. How do you integrate this in successfully?
Yeah, that's the great challenge, and that's kind of, I think, the great opportunity for real value identifying. We've actually spent a lot of time trying to kind of identify how do you, think about value, and how do you even kind of either quantify or qualify where you're getting that. Being a state organization, we're doing that ultimately to, save money, save time, increase levels of safety. And so being able to kind of understand, what are the steps required in order to kind of achieve those is, one of the, factors for how we really evaluate ourselves. And a big part of it is, that idea of normalization, where, it's one thing to say you can, fly a drone and take a picture, or even kind of produce kind of some imagery that is identified as valuable. What normalization kind of means to us is, it's not just that you know how to do that from the air safety perspective, or even from the data collection perspective. It's the workflow that you're really kind of supporting now understands where drones are going to be used, and really kind of has even kind of built into that existing workflow. And I use kind of the example of a lot of inspection processes already are derived from usually, federal oversight organizations, federal highway, whoever, that kind of specify things that must be done in order to kind of check the box that an inspection has happened. And none of those right now, provide opportunities for drones, or certainly don't kind of acknowledge it. And so getting to the point where we can begin to identify where, where we change those workflows, how we can actually incorporate drones is kind of, again, that's the goal. That process really kind of requires, I'd say, kind of three main things. First is very much, I think, a champion on in the end user organization. Certainly, our drone program is kind of, a centralized program of drone pilots. So we're going to be working with other, use case owners across the transportation infrastructure, and having someone out there that really is ready to take the time to kind of work with us and understand what data is being provided, what does the workflow look like, what does a new potential workflow look like. That's absolutely essential. We also, number two, we also really need to kind of embed our drone professionals with those end users. Like I said, we kind of have the, very much of a structure where we kind of have, the professional drone pilots who really understand the aircraft, understand the airspace, understand the sensors, but they also really need to kind of be embedded with those inspectors, with those kind of people in the highway division, the rail division, to understand what they are doing, how they are doing it. And lastly, you hit it. It's all about the data analysis and data dissemination. From the very get-go, we kind of acknowledge that a drone program is really a data program with a small flying component. And we really kind of built our entire system around it, where we have as large a data component as we do kind of a flight component. And understanding not only how do you, ingest, store, and access all those hundreds of thousands of pieces of data is one bit, but disseminating it to the end users is really kind of critical. A lot of our end users don't necessarily use GIS all the time. So understanding what are they using, what are the software tools, and at that point, it really almost becomes more of a CS challenge of how do you kind of take a lot of these kind of formats that we used to in one, perhaps, ArcGIS-like tool, and transmit them into a CAD tool or whatever it is that the end users want to use. So those are kind of pieces of the process in order to kind of really get to the point where it's not just that drones are, hey, that's exciting, let's see what that can do,
Right.
as here's the process, and hey, we're at the step where you call in the drone team where we fly the drone. That's what we really want to get to.
Yeah, I mean, this is so much more than just, flying, to your point, flying the drone. This whole aspect of geospatial and the data and how you're going to be able to use it effectively to make decisions quickly, whether you're saving money or saving lives. And since, we're talking about infrastructure, those two actually kind of go hand in hand, from a maintenance perspective, but also the future of the asset. So with that, speaking about infrastructure very specifically and an owner of that, Alex, what updates to technology or industry regulations does Spire, look forward to the most? You've got 5G, you've got BVLOS. Talk to us about that. What's going to make this easier for you in natural gas inspection?
Sure. Well, I'll touch on the low-hanging fruit. It would be nice if everything was cheaper.
Yeah.
There's quite a few of our use cases where we're considering very sophisticated equipment, particularly for methane detection. Not only methane detection, but methane quantification to assist us with our leak survey program and whatnot. The cost, those sensors are 6 figures each at the moment. And as a public company, sometimes we can get our stakeholders to invest in some of those things, but we have to be able to justify it. It would be easier to do so cheaply. But to speak to what you said is the common theme of the day is beyond visual line of sight operational capabilities, which are definitely an eventual goal for us. We're especially encouraged by the FAA's current trend of enabling and approving these waivers and hope to see that trend continue. I just saw an article recently on XL Energy's BVLOS program, 13,000 miles flown, BVLOS. That's very promising for anyone else looking to get into the space. Also primarily looking to see refinements in the collision avoidance technologies that a lot of these drones can come equipped to. Realistically, once we have both competent collision avoidance technologies to go with BVLOS operations, we can really then start to take our hands off of a lot of these operations. Removing most of the people encourages a lot of cost growth and profits. So we're just simply looking forward to improvements like that. Also really interested to see what happens with federal and state adoption. North Dakota's Vantis program, which is enabling the statewide BVLOS operations, is a very exciting prospect, and we hope to see that mirrored in other states, municipalities, what have you, at that point.
Right.
If we're allowed to be even more ambitious, the ability for one pilot to operate multiple drones at the same time, especially in tandem with BVLOS capabilities, would really open the floodgates for, not only us, I'm sure, but every industry. So we're eagerly awaiting the research results of, I believe NASA is actually looking into that, maybe with Zipline. Looking forward to what comes out of that. But to summarize, truly autonomous and mostly hands-off BVLOS operational capabilities would really open the door for many valuable prospects for us. Autonomous leak surveys, remote right-of-way inspections, and we're very hopeful that these prospects are more a matter of when than if at this point.
And you said something a second ago I want to ask a little bit, deeper question on.
Sure.
You said profitability. Do you see this initially as a cost savings initiative and also a potential profit center, or is it really, one or the other? How are you guys viewing that in a way that you can speak to?
So that is actually how we had to approach this initially, is how can we use drones to make our current work more efficient and therefore, cut the bottom line off of some of it. This is part of another question that I had lined up, but in a way we did purchase and start utilizing these drones with the intent that we have a lot of projects that could be done much more efficiently with these, even just visual inspections on drones, not even counting thermal imaging or gas imaging. And thus far we were correct. We've only been operating for about a year, but we have been able to plot out ROI for about 2 to 3 years from the purchase of these drones, and that's only about 100 flight hours for a lot of our use cases. So for us, it really did start as a program based in trying to seek profits and reducing or just improving efficiencies through our use cases. And for the most part, we've succeeded in doing so.
Okay, thank you. Riley, talk to us a little bit now about this whole aspect of 5G and the impact and what you're seeing with your projects and where you guys are going, and what holes exist in your current operations, and how will 5G help you address that and fix that?
Well, sure. To piggyback and really not to kind of throw it off, but really Alex covered a lot of it, a lot of great information of what we're all looking for. And what we're all hoping for with 5G. As far as North Carolina goes, again, like Alex said, the expansion, the possibilities, the connectivity of bigger and longer operations, more data that we can move. For us, of course, Zipline here, huge benefit for these guys. Huge benefit for all of our operations, really. Again, with North Carolina State University, they are a partner in exploring the 5G options and what that looks like. And so they were awarded millions of dollars for research and development. So they're looking at the infrastructure and what that looks like as far as building it out and how safe it is and how it's going to work. And so again, really just to piggyback on what Alex has said is we're all looking for the same thing. And again, is just longer, better operations that we can move more data and collect more imagery and faster speeds and really the secureness of not losing connections or data, or especially, just a few minutes ago, we were talking about public safety. We talk about all kinds of infrastructure, but in public safety, being able to go further, what can we capture? How quick can we do it? I really like what Alex said. 5G is going to be great, I'm sure, but how is it going to be adopted by other states and federal? That's where it's going to play out and what it's going to look like. So, I think Alex really hit it on the head.
Well, let me also add. I mean, I think it's even more than everything that they just both said about flying and operating the drones, but it's even more than that too. When we take a look at understanding to kind of the air situational or awareness around our airports, for example, we're imagining what sort of sensors, probably ground-based, are you going to need to deploy, in order to kind of identify, are there errant drones flying around the flight paths of a particular airport? That's the sort of thing also where you need to kind of have a massive amount of data be kind of brought back to that kind of centralized command post. And so you really kind of see many opportunities across the entire drone space that's more than just the drone aircraft itself.
Absolutely. And we had a question come in from Greg, and his question, and Riley, I'm going to throw this to you first, is what do you think the wireless industry needs to provide for you to run a successful program? And this actually can be for anyone, but what do you think that the wireless industry really needs to provide at this point in time for you to be to be more successful?
Reliability.
Reliability
And strength as far as dependency and being able to trust it. In our area, a lot of North Carolina is extremely rural. So, being able to trust it, the operations and trust that those, the signals and really just, it's a great question. I would say for us, for North Carolina, is dependability and access for us.
Scott, Alex, you agree?
Absolutely. I'd also just add regulatory support. So particularly when we're talking about, BV loss, it seems like, ISM will not be allowed. What will be allowed is, still up in the air a little bit. Certainly there's a lot of effort with the CNPC radios, with your, LTE. But again, I think there are still kind of questions about what that path is. And so really kind of having the wireless industry working very closely with the FAA and you're really kind of almost together kind of laying out a path, of a, approved spectrum, approved links that we can begin to use, I think is also going to be absolutely critical to move forward without the uncertainty that we still have right now.
Right. And Scott, on that note, as you're thinking about your current BV loss operations, I mean, we've heard a little bit already around what's needed. What kind of steps are you all taking now with your very centralized approach in developing that program? And, where do you see that going over the next 2 to 3 years?
Sure. I mean, our approach is, first of all, very operationally focused. At the end of the day, I'm looking to kind of provide value to, the other units of the transportation sector in Massachusetts. And so I'm flying, long linear infrastructure for the rail. I certainly have opportunities where I could fly for highway or even kind of broader flights around airports for, airport obstruction analysis. So in the end, operations kind of matter, and showing that efficiency gain is what I'm really kind of focusing on right now. So if I can take a small step forward and kind of show an efficiency gain from where I am today, I'm really kind of pursuing that. And that really is kind of the approach that we've taken, the crawl, walk, run is almost getting a little overused as a phrase, but we're very much kind of in that crawl phase, identifying what do we have right now that we can begin to kind of use in kind of that, BVLOS fashion. And really, together with kind of broad partnerships, have kind of put together our initial steps, to use, what we have. And we've actually kind of awarded at least a first 40-mile BVLOS waiver across some rail that even goes through some, through some controlled airspace, using the initial steps we have. We don't have a detect and avoid system. We're using VOs. We all know kind of what that looks like, but it really means that, I'm beginning to kind of put together the documentation, the processes, the regulatory kind of understanding with the FAA to help me move forward. And the other thing that we're really building on right now are those partnerships. A lot of the work that we've done already has been in partnership with MITRE Corporation, as well as with the MIT Lincoln Laboratory, the US DOT Volpe Center, really kind of organizations that we really are working with in order to kind of help understand what are those regulatory hurdles, what are the kind of technical approaches, and helping us move forward. I think, as an industry, though, we need to kind of get past the point where you need to kind of bring together so august a organization in order to move forward, but rather you kind of have more kind of clear and clearly defined approach for what it means kind of roll out a BVLOS. And so obviously that's what we're getting to, very much excited about. You mentioned North Dakota, following what North Carolina is doing. There's a lot of activity and we're really pleased to be part of it.
That's great. Alex, what do you think the future holds for Spire when it comes to drone operations for this inspection of infrastructure? What do you think that looks like in the next 3 to 5 years?
Sure. I'm excited to say that our trial period this first year of drone flights has been successful, both for quality of improvements qualitatively as well as quantitatively as far as ROI. We do plan to continue our visual inspection program. The drones are invaluable to the pilots that have currently used them. Their jobs would be much less efficient without them at this point. We do intend to expand our visual inspection program as well to include additional decentralized pilots, which seems to be where the value is for us at the moment, rather than centralization for our current operations. What our stakeholders currently look forward to the most, certainly, and I touched on this already, is drone-facilitated methane detection. An aerial drone-based solution could measurably enhance our current leak survey and even emergency response capabilities. Drones with methane detection payloads have the potential to be especially efficient and flexible by virtue of just the inherent mobility of the drone platform. We feel a drone-based solution could be a good compromise between area coverage and resolution when compared to other aerial or on-foot or even other vehicle-based options. And even more lucrative is certainly the potential for not only detection but quantification. Enhanced quantification capabilities for methane would strengthen our ability not only to respond to leaks appropriately with our resources, but as an added benefit would also bolster our greenhouse gas emission reduction efforts. There's plenty of technologies that currently exist to help us with this. It's the matter of finding the right one on a trial-by-trial basis. In regards to emergency response, this is another sector that we're looking to introduce drones to in our company that hasn't yet happened. Just the ability to locate a responder farther away from a potential natural gas emergency, while not impairing their ability to evaluate the emergency, would be very valuable to us as well. Riley's example earlier with the automated truck that had the tethered kite that went up upon detecting an accident, we would love for that level of automation for us if we're able to pinpoint a suspected source of a leak. Just lots of things on the horizon for us that we're looking forward to.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, this is really drones, working for you. Riley, when you think about the use of drones and from a use case perspective, which use case stands out to you right now as the most profound when it comes to inspection? And how is that changing the game on the ground, real time, with your end users?
I think the one for North Carolina that would stand out the most, and we've had a great run of guys in this department who have made it all possible, but hurricane response. We do a lot with infrastructure on a daily basis, but when Hurricane Florence come through and Darshan Devakaran, Basil Yap, myself, a large group of us were part of that effort. for us, it was just a game changer for the state. 15 teams, 7 to 10 days of straight flying across North Carolina, and just the information and the data that we were able to collect and push back real time for the governor, for our DOT administrative staff, for resources, for first aid, for emergency response, and really from an infrastructure standpoint, just really to see how North Carolina was cut off and what we needed to do immediately to try to solve that. So I would definitely say our hurricane response, and not to take away from all the other infrastructure and other missions that we're flying across the state on a daily basis, but the hurricane response really opened the door for a lot of possibilities for North Carolina.
Yeah, no, I've flown hurricane response in North Carolina, and you're absolutely right. One of the questions that it looks like Nick is actually looking ahead in my notes, but to what level are you building computer vision and AI into these inspection processes so that you can, reduce the human in the loop, which we know we're all moving to autonomy. But is that something, Riley, that you guys are currently, looking at or integrating or planning?
Sure. I mean, it's definitely something that we're planning and something that we're working with our Beyond program. Of course, we've got several partners in our Beyond program, and some of those guys are working towards that. And a lot of unique new softwares. Aerial Vantage is a group that is one of our Beyond partners. That's specifically kind of some of the things that they're working on and looking at. And then again, how can we partner with other modalities here in North Carolina to attain this? Today we're talking about UAS, but there's several other modes, as we all know, as far as transportation go from North Carolina, that are all working for the same common goal. And how do we all work together to achieve those? We don't have any set use cases right out of the gate that I can speak on other than some of our Beyond partners that are working on stuff, but it is stuff that we are exploring and stuff that we're working towards.
Okay. And Alex, for you, are you guys currently looking at, as a part of your whole process, computer vision into your workflow?
Looking at, absolutely. Our program is still a bit primitive, so we definitely haven't gotten to the step of even trying to realize what that would look like. Mm-hmm. But that is part of the eventual ideal future state wherein ideally we have drone hangars in places where we can just hit a button, deploy the drone, set it on a path, and it can report back to us both what we want to see and record the data in a way that's actionable for us, whether that's GIS overlays or orthomosaics or whatever it would be for us. So it's certainly in the future for us. We just haven't begun to realize it yet.
Well, one of the things that's, really critical in all of this work is management and how they are, responding to this. And so what are the key metrics you are using to show leadership the value of drones, Alex? This is coming from Greg.
Sure. For us, we latched onto, during the planning process for this whole pilot program, was labor efficiency savings and safety metric improvements as the main ones. Thus far, our main savings metrics have come from labor efficiency savings, even without computer vision and autonomy in our program. Just manually operating the drones, with automated pathing, of course, but has already shown ROI for a lot of our projects in a way that we can show it to our stakeholders in a way that encourages them to continue wanting to support the program. Funny enough, our use cases actually had very few recordable safety incidents to begin with. So while there were no new recordable safety incidents from onset of our pilot program, but that absence didn't actually show all that much improvement, which is a good thing. I can't really complain too much about that. Okay. The quality of the deliverables we're getting out of our drone infrastructure inspections have been harder to quantify, but have certainly been valuable. Just having something as simple as the bird's eye view of our construction sites, being able to stitch those together into large maps that we can overlay into our GIS systems, all very valuable, but we haven't quite put a dollar sign to those yet. So labor efficiency is definitely what we're latching onto as our key profit metric at the moment.
No. Okay, thanks. Scott, one of the things that we're often confronted with in our industry is, as we're implementing these programs, you've got urban projects and then you've got suburban and rural. And there are certainly interesting use cases and needs on across all three of those. How are you guys addressing this whole issue of rural implementation? Are you starting there? Are you, is this a part of the plan long, I'm sure long term, but how are you guys thinking about this phased approach of your operations?
So, I mean, a lot of the, I say, phase approach is kind of focusing, say, more on broadly the types of use cases that we're talking about, and perhaps less on the urban rural. A lot of Massachusetts is more urban or certainly suburban, and so when you imagine a lot of the use cases for agriculture that you see, in North Dakota, for example, we don't necessarily have those here. What we're really kind of trying to understand, particularly with things like again the again, long linear infrastructure inspection, is again how do we kind of take that? How do we do really kind of that hazard and risk analysis across the different areas, the very kind of urban core of downtown Boston through kind of the suburbs, and begin to kind of really kind of lay out that to make sure that we can really kind of fly really where we need to, in also a very kind of complex airspace. We do have a lot of controlled airspace across Massachusetts, so that is I think a lot of our focus right now is how to fly across various levels of complex airspace. Certainly some of the more rural or more kind of less congested airspace we'd be looking at, for example, would be like the Cape and the Islands. And so this is a matter of not necessarily flying over large rural areas, but even potentially flying over water. And so one thing that we've begun to at least demonstrate is what would, for example, an emergency delivery process look like to connect to Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, or even smaller islands that after a hurricane hits Massachusetts could be cut off, or large nor'easter. So that's some of the initial exploration we've done. It still really comes down to, frankly, a lot of those kind of 5G questions, though. How do you kind of maintain connectivity? How do you maintain kind of your detect and avoid throughout the entire area? So really kind of a lot of the same challenges are there, no matter what area you're talking about.
Well, Scott, on that note, that's you've hit the nail on the head. You mentioned your relationships with academia.
Mm-hmm.
What's the relationship like for further implementation and strategies for rollout with the private sector? Are there any examples that you might be able to share with us?
A lot of it right now is just trying to kind of begin to work with them in order to kind of demonstrate kind of new capabilities. So certainly the two areas I can describe would be, first of all, that delivery demonstration, really to work to understand what does that begin to look like, even in a very kind of operational sense. Where would be the nodes if you're trying to kind of deliver emergency something to Cape Cod and the islands. So working with that with some industry partners, and then actually going back to the infrastructure kind of focus of the discussion, starting to work with a lot of the kind of companies that have as their job in large infrastructure inspection, and making sure kind of we as kind of the DOT, really kind of the head of aeronautics at the state level, really are kind of tracking and able to kind of understand what they're doing and make sure that they're doing it safely. For example, a lot of the very large bridges tend to be inspected by private companies and not by mass DOT employees. And so we are working very closely with many of those companies to kind of qualify them for kind of drone operations and just make sure we're understanding how are they doing it, and that we kind of have kind of a safe operations kind of across across Massachusetts airspace.
Okay, thank you. Riley, one of the biggest issues with all of this is the type of equipment that we're using. And so, there's some great products out on the marketplace, but what are your challenges and also your desires if you were to be able to create the UAV that, there's not just one single one, but right now for your primary use cases, what are you missing right now in the marketplace in terms of the capabilities for equipment? What would you like to see in a drone?
I mean, I don't know that. I know people probably throw rocks at me when I say this. I don't know that there's so many options now. It used to be that there were, just a handful of suppliers and drone options out there, and now with UAS, things are expanding, things are growing. You've got more industry coming in. You've got all kinds of technology that's making its way to the market. A lot that's in research and development right now. Really, I think it's all there. It's just it's kind of just picking and choosing from the buffet of what do you want to put on your unit or your specific options that you're looking for. And so I think there's a lot there. I think the bigger task for North Carolina is convincing our leadership of return on investment, because right now there's a lot of what ifs, and just like we were saying earlier, is the return on investment and the value add that we're pushing out. But it's also explaining to our administration that we have to stay abreast of current technology. It's not something that we can keep doing with an old fleet or an outdated fleet. And everybody on this panel and everybody watching, that we all know that UAS are much like cell phones. They're really neat and wonderful right now, but next week there'll be something that's bigger and better. And so
Absolutely.
it's a growing technology. So I think that there's a lot of options there. And whether it be in really, the options are there. Is we're waiting on regulation to catch up.
Right.
The technology's there, the regulations are not. And so I think when the regulations start to be fleshed out, you're going to see more of those technology packages come together, and a lot more offerings. So
Okay.
my
All
thought.
right. Thank you.
ma'am.
And Alex, you get the last question as we're rolling down here. Talk to us about the end user. Are you sharing what you all are doing currently with your end users so people better understand how you're using technology to provide better service, more continuity in service, how to ensure that if there's an emergency, a storm, or any other kind of disaster, that you're able to utilize advanced technology to help them stay up and on?
Yes, in fact, so our program has been decentralized. I'm the administrator, but I'm decentralized in my own way also. But we've very much tried to solicit our services to other departments, both to try to get buy-in and just improve our ROI showings. So as far as we've done showcases of our current projects, our current use cases, our deliverables from those use cases to upper leadership, but also just gone door to door to other departments saying, hey, we have this technology, we can do this and this with it. Would you like to be involved? Is there anything that you guys think you could receive benefits from one way or another with the use of a drone for your use case? We've gotten buy-in. We have expanded the program to other departments since doing so. But it really is as simple as we wanted to realize the value for ourselves first, and then push it out there as soon as we knew it could be sustainable.
Okay, thanks. I'm gonna see if I can squeeze one more in very quickly. Riley, I'm gonna throw this to you. Can you speak on security concerns around privacy and data security and exploitation? That this is coming from Nick, which is a great question.
Sure, Nick. From a DOT or state operations standpoint, I can tell you that security and privacy are number one concerns. As you are all aware, there was a big concern of DJI products and certain leaders within the industry, their units or products sharing information or leaking information that would be a security risk. And with us, North Carolina, of course, as we all know, large military bases, a large prison system. So there's a lot of areas that we do worry about. And so what we've tried to do from a standpoint of North Carolina is we've tried to urge both state and private sectors. And when I say private, I mean, any business or industry that is private sector that would use UAS to expand their fleets, not just have one sole source item in your fleet or one drone in your fleet, but to expand those to various platforms and softwares. It is a huge concern. It's something that North Carolina takes very serious. We talk about it regularly. We as a state have not come out with anything per se specific banning certain drones. We do operate from a blue list. We take that into strong concern, especially for our state agency and with all of our military personnel, of course, and our bases. So, it's something that we're constantly addressing and looking at.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I know we've got to wrap up. We've got some more questions, and we will address those later. But thank you all, Scott, Alex, Riley. Appreciate your time. Fabulous panel. We look forward to hearing more from you in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.